G'day guys, welcome back to the off-season. Today we're going to go through a special episode that has been sent in or requested by a lot of you guys. We're going to go through our best 13 of players that have retired over the last decade. So 2013 onwards, our best 13 of retired players. A very, very hot field. There's a lot of positions that pick themselves, but a couple of tough ones, and especially in the forward pack, trying to find spots for so many guys got pretty difficult. My 5'8", Matty the Water Boy, joins me once again. Looking forward to this one, mate.
What's going on, Guru? Yeah, didn't text me this until about 20 minutes ago, but it was when you sent it to me, I was like, oh, geez, I don't know how I'm going to get this done. But then when you look at the list, it was pretty easy to get a list together. So very excited for this one.
Yeah, I wish I had like my first draft, my second, my third, and we've done this over a 20-minute period, but it has changed so much. You sort of come to realise, guys, as you go on. Mate, let's get stuck into this side. We are on a slight little time constraint here, so we will try and get through this one reasonably quickly for you guys. Fullback, Matty, there was one guy, and I don't think I could consider anyone else. The only other guy I could have considered, I've got him in another position anyway in this side. I'm safely assuming you're the same.
Yep.
Billy Slater at 1.
Yeah, look, my first thought when you sent me this was he was actually the first person I thought of getting this, but then obviously I was like, okay, Billy Slater's the best fullback of all time. Well, certainly the best fullback since I was watching rugby league. So yeah, pretty easy pick. Slater at number 1 there.
Yeah, obviously an amazing career for Billy. And as Matty said, GI was probably the other one we considered. Anthony Minicello, I sort of looked at, but just because of his injuries and everything, I couldn't have him on the same level as Slater and GI. So Billy Slater, he picks himself at fullback there. On the wings, I think there was one obvious standout that I assume we both picked.
Yep.
Brett Morris, I reckon he's a really good chance to get in as if I was picking my best team ever, let alone just my best of the last 10 years of retiring players, Matty.
I think he's definitely the winger of the decade. I don't have a single doubt about that. A lot of people say Semi Radradra, which was a good shout, but like he only played a couple of years, so that's why I've gone Morris, because he was so consistent over such a long period of time, had such longevity. Just unbelievable wherever he went. Just so good at the Dragons, great at the Doggies, and then pretty much had a huge hand in that 2019 grand final win. That grand final performance was crazy. And not only that, just an absolute hero for the New South Wales Blues. There's that footage of him making that last tackle in 2014 game 1. I've said this a couple of times, my favourite footy game ever outside of Rabbitohs, when he had dislocated shoulder. And there was about 5 minutes to go, and he just got in front of, I think it was Darius, and stopped the try. And yeah, he was just, in so many ways, he's an absolute legend of the game, Brett Morris.
Yeah, absolute weapon. So he picks himself on the wing for us. Mate, the other wing spot, the player that I've gone for, I don't think you'll go for. And you could throw any one of about 5 names at me, and I think it could get pretty interesting. Obviously, with a wing spot like this, the guy that I've picked started his career on the wing but played most of his time at fullback. We've mentioned him a few times, mate. I've gone for Anthony Minicello on the wing there. I absolutely loved watching Mini when I was younger. Obviously, when we were in high school, or start of high school, that was sort of like Mini's absolute peak, and I just loved watching him go around. So I picked Minicello on the wing, but I wouldn't be surprised if you throw a name at me here that maybe makes me double take. Who you got?
And just on Mini, so obviously growing up, South versus Roosters rivalry, I always despised Anthony Minicello as a kid. Not like just from being a 6-year-old jealous Rabbitohs fans when my team was winning 3 games a year and the Roosters were winning premierships. But yeah, when I got a little bit older, you come to appreciate how good Anthony Minicello was. And it's interesting hearing him talk now. Like he was on Kempy's podcast maybe 2 years ago, before my time anyway. He just talks about like the food that he eats. Like he's just this ultimate professional. He hasn't played in 10 years. And he looks like he could still play at the moment. But yeah, he is just so great. I think the 2014 prelim when South won, I think it was a great moment that the last play of that game was an Anthony Minicello try. Yeah. Even though they lost, but it was kind of deserving. He was such a freak. Yeah.
And I had him on my podcast too, probably about 2 years ago as well. And I just remember him talking about the end of 2004, they're in a grand final. He's the New South Wales fullback. He's the Kangaroos fullback. He's at the absolute peak. 2005 wins the Golden Boot. Then all these injuries happen, and it forced him to completely switch up his mindset as far as diet, training, stretching, and he just went from a fantastic footballer who would just swallow beers like they were going out of fashion to just this complete fucking professional. And it's crazy that even though all the stuff that he did, his body probably never repaid him for all that hard work that he did still. I think it's sort of forgotten just how good Minnie was as a footballer, playing fullback back then. Not now, like now your fullback's like a second 5'8". Wasn't like that all the way back then. And, we speak so much about, tackle breaks and what James Tedesco does nowadays. Minnie, at his peak, he was fucked.
Yeah.
He would bet but before Anthony Minicello, you used to see teams, they'd kick to the right corner and only like that side would come up. Minnie forced the entire line to come up because he'd just go dump, 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 bounce around, you rebound, pinball machine, that they used to call him back in the day. Minnie was a freak. Who's your winger, mate?
My other winger is Lottie Takiri. Now, he obviously maybe got a little bias because he was on the wing premiership for South, but like that's not what he's known for, obviously. Started at the Bronx, and him and Dell, like those, when people talk about like gun wingers, from say the turn of the millennium, 2000, everyone always starts with Dell and Lottie.
Yeah.
Obviously, most of his career was at Rugby Union, but played Origin, he was a dual international, came back to the Tigers. He was so good for the Tigers in that little period, and then finished off his career at South and finished with the premiership. One of the best to ever do it, Big Lottie.
Crazy narrative about how he ended up at South Sydney and how he won a Premier. Like, just unbelievable to think that in your we spoke. It's a very similar situation, mate, to what we spoke about with Brett Mullins about that Roosters premiership. He was the older head that went there, and I always find it amazing when you look back at your South Sydney team that won. The backline's full of kids.
Yeah.
They're all guys in their first and second year of first grade. It's unbelievable.
It's crazy. I remember a story actually in 2014. South lost round, I'm going to say round 3 or round 4 to the Raiders. It was in the last week of March, so it probably was round 3. It was one of the worst performances I've ever seen a Rabbitohs team play. It was like so bad, right? It was sunny. It was in Sydney, and Lottie was one of, say, 7. All the players had a shocker, but apparently Madge, straight after the game, went up to Lottie and said, I'm going a different way next week. Like, I have to make changes, blah, blah. And Lottie was like, yeah, sweet. And that could have been the end of him. That really could have been the end of him. But he forced his way back in. I don't know when he came back. I can't remember that far back. But he ended up on the wing for the South in the grand final. And that was before Alex Johnston debuted. That Raiders game. So Johnston debuted maybe 5 or I'm going to say around 10, 2014 against the Bronx. So yeah, unfortunately, I mean, I don't want to, obviously it was Nathan Merritt that missed out, which is absolutely heartbreaking, but credit to Lottie.
Yeah, 100%, mate. Now, centres, a name that we've already mentioned a few times, Greg Inglis. He shits in here for both. I'm not even going to ask you. So Greg Inglis, he gets in. There's no doubt about that. One of the greatest and most damaging players we have ever seen. The other centre spot is interesting, and there's probably 3 names that come to mind here for me. I've gone for a New South Welshman, or sometimes he didn't want to be a New South Welshman, but I've gone for Jamie Lyon, who I just think was an incredible footballer. I think that we haven't seen anyone before Jamie Lyon or after him that is, similar to him, because he was just so unique, essentially like a second 5'8" playing centre, kicking game, passing game, running game. He was always just so deceptively quick, Jamie Lyon. A tremendous player. We spoke about him when we were talking about the 0-1 Parramatta side a few weeks ago, that he didn't score a try in the first 12 weeks, I think it was. Then in the last 17, he scored 15 tries or something. An absolute freak, Jamie Lyon. Have you gone for him or have you gone elsewhere?
I honestly don't know if I've made the right call here. This is kind of like a lottery. I'm picking Justin Hodges. But you said there was 3 names. The third one was Josh Morris.
Yeah.
We might as well just talk about them both. Let's say my pick is Hodges. I don't even know. They're both so good in such different ways. We spoke about Hodges, I think, in the 2015 chat a couple of weeks ago, but he just provided something so different at centre. Yeah. He was it's funny, like he'd jump into dummy half, but you knew what was coming. You couldn't stop him. He just had so many great moments. Such a Queensland legend, such a Broncos legend. Obviously had that absolute stinker of a debut, and that could have absolutely shattered him. But I mean, I've never met Justin Hodges, but he seems like a pretty confident guy. And I mean, to jump in the ring with Paul Gallen, you got to be fucking ballsy. So it just shows the character he is, and he turned out to be one of Queensland's greatest ever. And he's arguably, I know we say arguably a lot, but he's arguably in Queensland's best ever Origin team. And obviously he was there for the 8 in a row pretty much the whole time. So yeah, Justin Hodges, I don't think I can leave him out. He's too good.
Yeah, and I think that if I couldn't find a spot for him in my Queensland best 17, he'd be one of the first names I'd mention as the unluckiest guys not to be there.
Yeah.
A tremendous player. And yeah, look, I could have gone with Lyon or with Hodjo. I probably had Josh Morris just a step behind those guys. But to be fair, if you're going to talk about, obviously when we're talking centres, we talk about the attacking side of things. If you're going to talk about who was the best defensive centre out of the three, it is Josh Morris by a fair whack, in my opinion. So
I reckon it's crazy. Like, we talk about it all the time, how Josh Morris ran down Inglis with I think his PCL was fucked in his knee, and Brett Morris made that tackle with the dislocated shoulder. How fucking crazy is that? That happened, twins, in the 100th Origin game, and then it was up in Suncorp, and it was pretty much the reason we won the drought-breaking series. Like, you couldn't write a script more perfect than that.
It's crazy. And we also spoke about it a few weeks ago, like the narrative of their father as well, just this whole family in general. His dad went from park football, playing on the wing, to being a halfback for the Dragons, who won a Dally M and a Clive Churchill in 12 months. It was just that family, they are just on another fucking level, those guys. So, yeah, my backline, Slater, Mini, Line, GI, Brett Morris. We get to the halves. Unfortunately, Matty, I think we've got to just pick two Queenslanders here, don't we? I don't think there's any real question. I think it has to be Cronk Thurston.
It does, yeah. But as I said to you before, I'm putting it, I don't care. I'm changing the rules. I'm putting in a 14. I'm putting in James Maloney as my 14. In my opinion, I reckon he's the most underrated player of the decade. And that's not saying people don't rate him. Like, everyone rates him. But I rate him as like a player, as a team of the decade. He's in my team of the decade. 100%. He's just how he just went to so many different teams and just kept winning, just kept doing it for Origin. Oh, man, I love James Maloney.
I think like a guy like James Maloney is a classic, because I've said it before, I still think he's underrated. People go, what do you mean he won 2 comps? It's like, yeah, no, I know he won comps, but the only thing that stopped him from winning comps was literally age. Like he could have, like if only he was discovered a little bit earlier in his career. Like he was at Parramatta, he was at Melbourne, and it's only at the Warriors in 2011 that he finally started to get some momentum there. He took them all the way to a grand final. I mean, like, and I was listening to a podcast the other day with Anthony Watmo was talking, and he was saying that, if that grand final went for 10 minutes longer, they were gone.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden that could have been another grand final that falls the way of James Maloney. Imagine if he would have won the first ever premiership with the New Zealand Warriors, the first ever premiership with the Cronulla Sharks, and then also obviously had the Roosters won their first one in 10 odd years. It's crazy.
He's just unbelievable. But and even without the Warriors one, he's done so much. The best story about James Maloney was when I was in Origin in 2018, and it's made the news, so you probably heard it. But in 2018, game 1, that was the game that Freddie picked all those debutants.
Yep.
And it was down in Melbourne, and the Blues were dominating, but they were only up by I think 4 or 2, somewhere in the first half. And the Blues were attacking Queensland's line. They're on the attack, and they threw an intercept. And Dane Gagai, or was it Gagai or Val? One of them two took the intercept and ran the length. And then all the Blues' work was undone. Queensland were ahead. Behind the post, Maloney's just barking at every single one of them, saying, "Stop fucking worrying about it. Who gives a fuck? Who gives a fuck? This game's ours, blah, 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 blah." He was the one that threw the intercept.
Yeah.
Like, that's just the type of person he was.
Oh, I think it's the most underappreciated asset in rugby league, that guys can make 9 mistakes and not be afraid to make the 10th. Which it can sound like a negative sometimes. Like I always look at Reece Walsh, for example. Like he can make as many mistakes as he wants, but he's still willing to put his balls on the line to try and win the game on the next play. Yeah. And Maloney was like that. He was an absolute freak, James Maloney. So he narrowly misses out to...
He's got the most airtime. He didn't even make the 13.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And yeah, he obviously misses out to Cronk and Thurston. Look, two guys that we've spoken about a lot over the last few weeks. So probably no need to go into too much depth. Obviously, Thurston, his individual record as far as Dally M's Golden Boots, all that stuff is fucking incredible. And Cronk, just the best winner we've seen potentially ever. I really do think. Obviously, you can go back to your St. George teams that won 11 in a row and some of these guys and whatnot. But what Cronk did in the most vital position on the field, which he didn't play until he got to first grade, to do what he did, fucking unbelievable.
It's crazy. And I think, when's this coming out?
Sunday night.
Yeah, so by this point, there'll be a thing on Bloke in a Bar snippet of Tuck Yaho talking about Cronk. It'll fucking blow your socks off. So I'm sure everyone's watched it by now, but just crazy what he did for that 2018 grand final. Like, everyone knows the story, but like when you hear a player talk about it, crazy.
Well, where I'm sitting right now, Kempy told me about it yesterday, and it blew me away. I cannot wait to sit and watch it, hear it from his mouth. Incredible stuff. So Cronk and Thurston, they are our halves with James Maloney. Pretty unlucky. Forward pack. That's where it gets interesting. Let's get Hooker out of the way. Who have you got, mate?
Obviously, Cameron Smith.
The GOAT?
Yep.
Cam Smith.
Wow. Is he the GOAT or is Joey the GOAT?
We'll save it for another day. Cam Smith puts himself at 9. There's no doubt about that. I think by far and away the best player of this decade. I don't think there's a real conversation there. Front rowers, though, is where it gets interesting. And I don't know, Matty, how you want to do this. If you want to link your lock forward into your front row as just middle forwards maybe. But for me, in the front row, I picked Sam Burgess and Paul Gallen. Obviously, Sam Burgess, you could have picked him at 13, which I'm safely assuming that's probably where Matty's picked him. I've gone for Gallen and Sam Burgess in the front row, just two absolute warriors. A lot of guys that are unlucky not to get into the front row, but I just couldn't leave those two out, and I went for a bit more of a craftier 13. Who's in your front row, mate?
Yeah, so I've gone Gal, obviously. It's funny, back in year 10 at school, we had our teacher was Ben Gardner, who is an assistant coach at the moment for Penrith. So he took Serrato's gig, but last year he was assistant coach at Tigers, and he actually coached the game when Kamali was out with COVID or whatever, when the Tigers got robbed by the Cowboys. So Benny Gardner at the time was working for the Sharks. And I've mentioned this bloke a few times. Me and my mate, Daniel Hahn, we argue about everything. Like, we probably never had a pleasant conversation. We just argue about everything. And year 10 was all just Gallen versus Burgess, because he's a Sharks fan, I'm a South fan. Gallen, Burgess, Gallen, Burgess, Gallen, Burgess. To a point where we'd ask our PE teacher, who's better? Like, just two guys who are very different, but if you really sit back and think about it, like the impact that these two had on the game, it's hard to separate them. Like, you could say Burgess is more skillful, but you could say that, you know, Gallen was somehow more important in other ways. Like, they're just two great, tough, like probably two of the toughest guys on my team. Never take a backward step. Like, such club legends. Did what they did for, like, obviously Gal was a Blues warrior and Burgess was a gun for England. So yeah, Burgess is my 13. Gal's my front rower. And then my other front rower, it was a bit hard. Like, I had a few options. Like, I've thought about Greg Eastwood, because I love Greg Eastwood. What he did I think it was the 2014 Four Nations, it was just unbelievable. I'm pretty sure he was played at the tournament. Like, he's so good, and he was so skillful as well. I think he played a couple of games in the wing for the Broncos. Like, he's just, I love Greg Eastwood. He had Matt Scott, but it's hard not to be biased. And George Burgess just retired, and he won us a comp in 2014. And to be fair, I reckon his best year was 2013, because go look at George Burgess highlights. He would just score. I think he scored like 7 or 9 tries that year in the front row, and all of them the exact same. Just got the ball on the 10-meter line and just crashed through them. I know, like, you know, injuries kind of, if you have a bit of recency bias, which we all do, don't let, like, those last few years, you know, don't let those last few years, like, have an impact on how you think about George Burgess, because he was the best front rower in the game for a good couple of years in that little period. So that period of George Burgess would make my team every day of the week.
I think, and I understand why you've gone with Georgie Burgess, obviously being a proud South Sydney boy. There was one guy that you did mention there that I think he got about half a second airtime. Matt Scott, he's unlucky. Not if I was forced to pick a bench, I would definitely find a spot for Matt Scott, I think.
Oh, 100%. And like, you know what? I'm probably being biased. Like Matt Scott probably, he's very unlucky not to make my team. I reckon, you know, if he asked 5 people who their props would be, I reckon 3 of them put Matty Scott in. He's so good.
I still remember I was up for an Origin once in Brisbane, and I just walked past Matt Scott in the street, and mate, I could not believe he is just built like a fucking barrel.
Yeah,
he is just. It's like the width of his shoulders is the same down to his ankles almost. It's insane. Huge body. Tremendous player. Now your 13 was Sam Burgess. I'll chuck you mine. I actually wore Glenn Stewart. One of my favourites of all time. And, you know, Sam Burgess obviously played a lot of 13, so did Paul Gallen, both tremendous players, but I could obviously shove them into the front row. And to get a guy like Gifty, I just loved everything about him and the way that he went about his footy. And I was listening, as I said earlier, I was listening the other day to the interview that Hello Sport had with Anthony Watmoe. And, you know, Chock Watmoe played for the Kangaroos, played New South Wales, played, you know, with all these premiership winning teams with Manly. And he said in that Gifty's the best player he's ever played with, which like just says, obviously they're mates and whatnot, but like just the way that he spoke about him and some of the things he'd do on the field and at training, a tremendous player, Glenn Stewart. So I've gone for him at 13. Very happy with him there. Back rowers. We sort of got up lists of, you know, retiring players and whatnot, and quite often on those lists, so, you know, guys are left out that might have retired mid-season or guys that, you know, maybe didn't retire in the NRL, and this was the case of these 2 guys that we ended up going for. I had about 4 names in the back row, then as soon as I remembered Boyd Cordner and Sonny Bill Williams, everything went out the window. Hard to leave either of these 2 out.
I mean, I'm never, ever leaving Boyd out of my footy team, ever. And I mean, that goes for Sonny Bill as well, but like, that's obvious. Like, Boyd Cordner, what he did for New South Wales can never, ever, ever be understated. And all you got to do, you don't have to watch him. All you got to do is listen to how his teammates speak about him, and that's it. Like, he's just the toughest. You know what? I said Burgess and Gow were the toughest 2 in my team. Corner is right in with these guys as well. Like, he is just he retired. A bit like Sam Burgess, he retired because he's so fucking tough.
Yeah,
and he had one of the most. I think Jackson Hastings said it recently, like, think about what he's achieved, right? Like, he won a comp in 13, but then he won a back-to-back comps as captain, won back-to-back Origins as captain, and I don't think he won World Cup as captain, but he obviously won a World Cup. Well, won a couple of World Cups for Australia as well. So, yeah, I mean, he retired. He did. There's nothing else he could have achieved, really.
Yeah, and I think that's the standout thing from Boyd's career, that, you know, obviously won the back-to-back Origin Shields, the back-to-back NRL trophies. Yeah. I don't have it in front of me, but I went back through and had a look at the last guy to do that, and it was unheard of. Like, I don't think it had happened. There might have. I
don't think it had happened for the Blues.
Yeah, I don't think it happened for the Blues. Alf might have. I don't even think Alf did it for Queensland Day. Like, it was just
because all the Storm boys never went back to back. So
exactly right. Yeah. So it's insane to think about. And I don't know if Sterlo would have done it with Parramatta, but I don't think he was the captain of the New South Wales side at that point. Yeah. So you'd have to go through and have a look throughout history. But I don't think there's anyone in any recent history. And considering Origin, you know, really started in 1980, I'm almost willing to say that no one's done it.
Yeah.
Without going back and having a look through the stats and everything. So
I'm sure, you know what? I'm sure someone will correct us. If
someone will correct us, I'm sure. I have no doubt about it whatsoever.
I hope so. I'd actually be interested to know, actually.
Yeah.
But I do remember looking this up when I worked for the Blues, and I didn't look up the Queensland side of things. I don't think it's happened for the Blues.
I'm pretty confident it hasn't happened for the Blues. I don't. Like, there hasn't been enough teams that have gone back to back.
Well, think about it. When the Broncos went back to back in 92-93, the Blues won 92-93. So
of course,
it's very unlikely that would have happened. Then who was before that? Was it?
Yeah, it was
No, there was another one. Who won back to back before that?
Yeah, the Canberra Raiders 89-90.
The Raiders, yeah.
Yeah, so you'd have to go and have a look. But even there, yeah.
But the Raiders,
Mal Meninga might have done it, actually.
Yeah, maybe. Possible. Yeah.
Mate, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, crazy one. If you have got time to have a look at it, please do let us know. Insane what Boyd Cordner managed to achieve. And I always, there's not a stat for it, but mate, those toughest hit-ups are when you're coming out of your own 20-metre line out of a corner, and that was Boyd Cordner's bread and butter.
Yeah.
Just bumper bars up, you're going to get fucking slapped around. He would always get to his front.
Yeah. And look at 2019, both the GF and Teddy's try in Origin. Look who takes the hit up
before.
For both of them.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And I reckon that 2019 grand final, that is an absolute fucking classic what he managed to do there. He managed to force BJ just to make a chop tackle. A tackle that, to be fair, when we were kids, it was a textbook tackle. It was perfect. But you cannot let guys like Boyd Cordner get to their elbows and knees and get a quick play the ball because it's over. And that's what... I know a lot of people want to put the referee call in that Raiders grand final, but fuck.
Robbed.
Right, sure. That hit up by Boyd, fuck, it made a difference. Good God.
Honestly, listen to... and by the way, the Roosters deserve that win purely because they defended the fucking whole second half.
Yes.
The funny thing is, and I feel sorry for Raiders fans, but it's not like they got a try taken away,
Exactly right.
Anyway, but if it was South, I'd still be blowing up. So whatever, especially against the Roosters. Anyway, sidetrack. Again, listen to Takiaho talk about that. Because they defended the whole second half, they were fucked. Every single Roosters forward was absolutely fucked, and then Boydo just goes and takes a run like that.
Yeah,
incredible. He is something else.
Now, the other one was Sonny Bill Williams that we both had. One of the greatest footballers we've ever seen. One of the greatest athletes we've ever seen, mate.
Yep, 100%. I nearly just said one of the greatest athletes we've seen in Australia because he's from New Zealand.
From New Zealand, worldwide.
I'd love to claim him, but
I'd love to. He just became a billboard and icon, didn't he?
Oh, and even in boxing, when he just because of his name, he just has eyeballs on him from all around the world. Dual international, and not just a dual international, just one of the best in certainly rugby league. I assume rugby union. I know nothing about rugby union, but
yeah,
fucking just there's nothing more to be said about Sonny Bill.
The number one thing that stood out for me with Sonny Bill was that when he did go to Union, and I'm the same, mate, I know very little about Union. I've got a couple of mates who are very keen Union fans, and I remember I'd always, when Roger went over there, I'd go, fuck, he's so good, how's he going to go? And they'd go, no, he won't make the All Blacks. And I'd go, surely he will. And I think he has played, but he hasn't been overly successful.
Yeah.
I'd always say, oh, what if this guy went there? What if this guy went there? And they'd always sort of play it down. And I remember these mates sort of played down SBW when he first went, but then within a few months they were going, nah, he's a shoot. He has to be in the team. He's jumped ahead of all these guys that I hear about all the time from my Union mates. So credit to SBW to be able to jump, here and there and go from sport to sport and whatever. And I think for me, mate, the crowning moment, 2013, what he managed to do in that season was unbelievable. You think about that, when that season started, the Roosters, James Maloney arrives, Jenko arrives, but it was Sonny Bill Williams that made the real big difference to that side. He just took them to another level, and especially in that grand final, I know we've spoken about it before, I reckon he had a shocking first half.
Yeah.
Might have been the worst first half he'd played all season, potentially of his career. He was fucking awful. And as you said with James Maloney, very similar character. No matter how many mistakes they make, they don't care. They're there to win that game of football.
Apparently he apologised at half time and said, I'll win it for you, or something crazy.
Doesn't shock me in the fucking slot. He was awful in the first half.
Yeah.
Awful. And then came out absolutely killed in the second half. He threw the offload to James Maloney that I think SKD ended up scoring off the back of. Came up with a couple of very, very, very big plays there, Sonny Bill Williams. You've got the same back rowers, yeah?
Yeah, of course.
Handy 13 there. So mine, Slater, Minicello, Lyon, Inglis, Brett Morris, Thurston, Cronk. Front rowers, Gallen, Burgess, Cam Smith. I've got Cordner and SBW in the back row with Gifty in the 13. Matty, take us through yours.
So Billy Slater, Brett Morris, GI, Hodges, Lottie Takiri, JT, Cooper Cronk, Paul Gallen, Cam Smith, George Burgess, Boyd Cordner, SBW, Sam Burgess, and James Maloney at 14.
14. James Maloney. I might have to chuck him in the 14 too.
I reckon he was the highlight of this podcast.
He quite possibly might have been, which is such a James Maloney fucking thing. It's not even funny. Guys, thank you for joining us once again on the off-season. Sorry we didn't get a best 17 out on Thursday, but we had a bit going on. Matty, I had a little war with the NRMA, which I'll have to tell you about later, which took up...
Oh, wow.
about 3 more hours than what it should have. So that was a fucking nightmare. But we will be back this week with our best 17s for 2023. On the video before this one, I put in the comments, whichever team gets the most likes, it's the first one me and Matty will go through. So if you want to go back and have a look at that, I'll be checking that over the weekend to see which team we go through on Tuesday afternoon after we got Bloke in a Bar on Monday, where we're going to be going through a couple of the squads. That's going to be an absolute cracker. Really looking forward to that one, Matty.
Honestly, we could have, that podcast that we did on Wednesday could have gone for another 4 hours. We had to cut that so short.
Yeah. It's going to be a cracking couple of weeks of content coming your way, guys. If you are out this weekend enjoying yourself, grab a case of Bloke in a Bar. Go and have a look at the stockist list on the website there, and we will see you during the week. Cheers, legends.